Almost 1 month has passed and the Israeli barbaric crimes in Gaza continue unabated. Hello and welcome to the West Asia Post. I am Ghadi coming to you from Beirut, and this is our weekly show where we bring you all things new from the world's most volatile region. Almost all northern Gaza has been flattened. More than 1.5 million people have been internally displaced. More than 13,000 killed. All this happening in the 21st century as the so-called peace-loving developed countries are still ignoring it. We have a lot to discuss, but first let's start with taking a look at the top developments from Gaza. Take a look. The White House says Israel has agreed to 4-hour humanitarian pauses every day in northern Gaza to help civilians flee the region, but rules out the possibility of a ceasefire at present. Iranian foreign minister says expansion of the Gaza conflict is slowly becoming inevitable due to the expansion of the intensity of the war against Palestinians. The Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt reopens to allow a limited number of wounded people and foreign passport holders to flee the war. Although all we see from Gaza is destruction, death and despair, it was once a very blooming city. A very old one as well on the Mediterranean. Today, no place is safe, not a hospital or a school or a refugee shelter, no doctor, no journalist, no civilian fleeing their home. Nothing hasn't been hit yet. Israel carries on its operation and the death toll continues to rise. In the following report, we take a look at this once blooming city of Gaza and how it all became different, just one big graveyard. Take a look.
A 365 square kilometer piece of land, infamously dubbed the world's biggest open-air prison. This is Gaza. Happy, complete, despite choking Israeli constraints. It had multi-stories, cafes, hospitals and schools. This was Gaza before October 7th, before Hamas launched its deadly attack on Israel, before Israel unleashed the worst horrors on Palestinians. This is the Gaza we know today, half turned to rubble, parts ablaze, burnt down rubble. Nothing but destruction visible to the naked eye. This is an imagery developed with damage analysis using data from Sentinel-1 Copernicus. It has been produced by Corey Sher of the CUNY Graduate Center and Jamon Wande-Hook of Oregon State University. As per their analysis, more than 30% of northern Gaza has been turned to rubble in the last 1 month. Nearly 18% of the total strip's multi-level infrastructure turned to rubble. The imagery received from the European Space Agency's Sentinel-1 satellite provides the most comprehensive look at the scale of the damage yet. This is still not the complete picture though. A comprehensive look is impossible given an active war situation. Gaza before the invasion had 35 operational hospitals. At least 18 of them are not functioning as of now. More than 50 primary care clinics have been targeted in Gaza, and some of them were damaged in Israeli strikes. But most ceased operations after fuel ran out. According to the UN Office for Humanitarian Affairs, at least 40 bombs are dropped on Gaza every hour. 12 buildings are destroyed, more than a dozen people killed, and over 30 injured. Most casualties in the Gaza siege are women and children. No surprise, given that children make for around 1/3 of the Strip's population. More than 4,000 children have been killed in Gaza. The number continues to rise as we speak. The World Health Organization says an average of 160 children are killed each day in the besieged Gaza Strip. The death toll of children killed in Gaza has surpassed the annual number of children killed in global conflict zones since 2019, be it Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, or even Ukraine. Since then, the number of tiny bodies wrapped in white shrouds and surrounded by grieving family members has only grown. There are people in Gaza who have been killed, those who cheated death were injured, and those who avoided missiles displaced. More than 1 million people have been internally displaced in Gaza. This is the reality of Gaza. Innocent people with no links to the claimed terror group bearing the brunt of Israeli vengeance.
Now to the country I'm currently standing in, to Lebanon. Lebanon is mourning the death of 3 girls and their grandma. They were fleeing southern Lebanon. They were coming down because they had schools the next day, but an Israeli missile hit their car. The grandmother and the 3 granddaughters died in front of their mom. She watched them burn and scream until they died. Now, will Lebanon have a response? What will Lebanon's response be? To try and answer these questions in the following report.
Lebanon is in collective mourning for its grandmother, granddaughters killed this week. In an indiscriminate Israeli attack, the Israeli airstrike killed 4 civilians, 3 of them children in southern Lebanon.
It wasn't enough. Gazan blood wasn't enough for them. Killing Gazan children wasn't enough. They attacked Lebanon and the children. Blood is shedding in Gaza, and now they are coming to Lebanon. We are joined with Gaza in blood.
The victims were all traveling in a car to the northern part of the country, trying to escape the constant bombardment. Their car was hit by the missiles they were desperately trying to avoid. The car burst into flames, and all the passengers burned to death. The victims were related to local Lebanese journalist Samir Ayoub. Samir was traveling in the car just ahead of them. Picking through the wreckage of the car, he narrates the ordeal, holding up school books and bags charred in the blast.
3 kids. I saw them. I carried them with my hands. 3. Children were burnt in the car. No one could save them. I carried their mother, but she kept screaming and saying, "My children, where is the terrorist? You are the terrorist, you Israelis."
Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati has condemned the Israeli attack, saying they will lodge a complaint at the UN. The Israeli military seemed to justify the gruesome murder. It said they had identified the car as a suspected transport for terrorists and is looking into reports of civilians killed in its attack. The Lebanese militia group and arch-Israeli foe, the Hezbollah, has vowed a strong response. Its lawmaker Ali Fayyad said, "The resistance will respond double to any aggression that targets civilians." Hezbollah even launched missiles across Israel, killing a person in Kiryat Shmona. The escalations along the Al-Sham border ignited fears of Lebanon being dragged into the war. But last week, the Hezbollah chief addressed these fears. Nasrallah distanced Hezbollah from the Palestinian fight. He called it a Hamas battle that Hezbollah supports in spirit. The militant chief also said Lebanon will not be dragged into the war as of now. But if Israel escalates the situation, there will be a firm response. Amid all the diplomatic and verbal duels, Beirut is taking measures to cope with the increasing internal displacement as people from the south flee their homes. It is a war that no one can afford. Hezbollah might be more powerful than it was in 2006, but Lebanon is weaker. Its economy is in doldrums. The people are frustrated. All stakeholders realize that direct engagement will not only spread the conflict, but also spell doom for the entire West Asia.
What will happen after the war ends? What will happen to Gaza? Now, this is a question that is on everyone's mind. From the President of the United States to a common Jordanian in the street, everybody wants to know, will there be a Gaza left to govern? Who would govern it? The Palestinian Authority, the Arab world, or someone else? Now, in the following report, we try to shed a light on the possibilities. Take a look.
What happens to Gaza after the war? It is a question that many in the Arab world hesitate before asking. What happens after Gaza is flattened? Asking this question is too early for many, but for Israel, its leaders might be dropping hints about their plans for the day after.
President Biden has said that it would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza. Who should govern Gaza when this is over?
Those who don't want to continue the way of Hamas. It certainly is not. I think Israel will, for an indefinite period, will have the overall security responsibility, because we've seen what happens when we don't have it.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has publicly stated that Israel intends to retain security control of Gaza and has no intention of creating a civilian government in the enclave. Since the October 7 attack, the Israeli position has been they want to eliminate Hamas from the face of the earth. It wants to destroy the group and also make sure it does not regroup again. Israeli aims and strategies seem good only on paper and only to their far right. It cannot be realized soon. It also will not be legitimized by its staunchest ally, the US, let alone regional players. Washington officials say they are actively discussing post-war scenarios with Israeli officials, and none of them include a possible Israeli occupation or Hamas coming back to power.
The United States believes key elements should include no forcible displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. Not now, not after the war.
Netanyahu's statement was a pivot from the Israeli line that they do not want to rule Gaza and would hand it over to an international coalition after Hamas is eliminated. This coalition will have members that include signatories to the Abraham Accords, West Asian powers Israel is comfortable working with, the US, UK, and the UN. This solution, too, comes with its cost. The longer Israel plunders Gaza, the harder it will be for the Jewish nation to get Arab cooperation. Additionally, the Arab states have historically preferred to not get directly involved in the Palestinian conflict. They have supported the cause, but from a distance. The other possibility is a West Bank-like setup in Gaza, where the Palestinian Authority comes to power, just like the early 90s. But things are different this time. This option is more unlikely than an international coalition. The reason is that the Palestinian Authority has lost its reputation among the Palestinian people. The party by itself does not want power. Speaking to a UK-based publication, Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh said that the Palestinian Authority has no interest in running Gaza until there is a solution for West Bank and actual groundwork for the Palestinian state. But these are all far-fetched scenarios. For what if Gaza will remain to administer after the Israelis halt their strikes? Almost half of the strip has been leveled. All infrastructure destroyed. It will take years, billions of dollars in funds and post-World War II like rebuilding plan before we even start to think of Gaza's future. Israel for now has rejected calls for a ceasefire. It has vowed to keep bombing Gaza until Hamas is eradicated. This is exactly what has gone wrong. There is a certain vagueness in Israeli ambitions of eliminating Hamas. The group also employs hundreds of essential workers. They are teachers, judges, and bankers. There is an entire political wing belonging to Hamas. the one that came to power almost 2 decades ago. But what about these people associated to Hamas? Will Israel target them too? Gazans as of this day face statelessness and denial of dignity, national rights, and individual rights. Their situation seems like a long twilight of disintegration and despair. With the way atrocities are unfolding in Gaza, there are fears of something mightier than Hamas taking shape. It will be fueled by vengeance, just how Israel is today. The Hamas we know today was born 4 decades ago, to end Israeli occupation and liberate Palestine. And in hindsight, those were days with better understanding, with better prospects. As of today, the Israeli drums of revenge are beating, and its actions will set the tone for the region's future for years to come.
Now, the recent war on Gaza has changed some of the dynamics in the region. Some of the regional powers are now sharing tables. The infamous foes, Iran and Saudi Arabia, will be joining tables in the OIC meet. Now, President Raisi of Iran will visit Saudi Arabia. More in this report.
War is the biggest divider, but can also be the biggest unifier. Israel and Gaza are witnessing their worst conflict ever. Tensions run high, the air is charged. There's not only a fear of a spillover of the conflict, but also a greater diplomatic opportunity on the horizon. This week, West Asia will see unprecedented decades-long enemies with only recently normalized ties sharing the same table. Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi is visiting the Saudi capital, the first Iranian leader to set foot on Arabian soil in years. In Riyadh, he will take part in an extraordinary OIC meet at which leaders of all Muslim countries will discuss the crisis in Gaza and the Palestinian suffering at the hands of Israel. The two leaders had even spoken over the phone shortly after Israel declared a siege on Gaza. In an unprecedented truce brokered by China 7 years after severing bilateral relations, Saudi Arabia and Iran, the region's Sunni and Shia heavyweights, buried the hatchet in March and agreed to restore diplomatic relations. There's still no indication if Raisi will have talks with Saudi Crown Prince MBS. Some Saudi reports have, however, ruled out the possibility. The OIC meeting comes at a time when regional powers are engaging in hectic diplomatic efforts to convince Hamas and Israel to contain their war and prevent it from spilling across borders and sucking in neighboring nations. Western officials, meanwhile, gathered in the French capital to discuss aid to besieged Gaza. Representatives from the EU, US, UN and Arab nations, as well as several non-profit groups working in Gaza, are attending the Paris gathering. They aim to provide more support to Gaza in the form of floated field hospitals and even a maritime humanitarian corridor.
Civilians must be protected, and this is absolutely essential and non-negotiable. In the immediate term, we need to work to promote civilians. To do this, we need a rapid humanitarian pause, and we need to work towards a ceasefire.
More than 1.5 million people, or about 70% of Gaza's population, has been internally displaced. Scenes similar to the Nakba are emerging as thousands of Palestinians leave northern Gaza by foot. Agencies say an estimated $1.2 billion is needed to respond to the crisis in the Palestinian territory. That excludes the cost of rebuilding the enclave. All conferences and meetings have been calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, making fervent appeals that Israel has been ignoring. Meanwhile, there are reports of Qatar negotiating the release of a dozen more hostages soon. Be it the OIC meet or the Paris gathering, no diplomatic effort would have succeeded until Israel stops its ruthless and barbaric bombing of Gaza and Hamas releases all hostages.
Watching the videos, the social media and the news coming from Gaza, many people are left helpless. But many in the Arab world resorted to boycott. They are using their consumer power. And the international brands are starting to really feel it. I'm talking about McDonald's, Starbucks and many others. Recently, they are mentioning even Dior. You know, globally, the buying, the purchasing power of Arabs is very big, especially in the fashion industry. Take a look.
Dissent is growing in West Asian social media.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
Its intensity increasing by the minute against the Israel-Hamas war. People in West Asia are venting this frustration by boycotting Western products and companies that support Israel's war on Gaza. From Starbucks to AXA Insurance, people are calling out to stay away from these brands. Their campaign is trending on TikTok, YouTube and Instagram. Children as well as parents are shunning major Western brands. Angered by the Israeli attacks, Arabs have turned against the brands associated with Israel's allies, notably the United States. They are also calling on their governments to cut ties with Israel, while pro-Palestinian rallies are being held weekly in major capitals. Arab leaders are also supporting the boycott. Turkey and Jordan have recalled their ambassadors from Israel, registering their protest against the horrific war crimes. Saudi Arabia announced a pause in normalization talks, and Bahrain's parliament said it has halted trade ties. The Turkish parliament even joined the people's movement. Effective this week, all Coca-Cola or Nestle products will not be sold in the parliament premises. Lawmakers say they will not help fill the war chest of Israel that is responsible for killing thousands of Palestinians. Not surprisingly, in this age of consumerism, the marketplace is the latest front in this war. Brands are synonymous with identities. The choice of a brand says something about its consumer. For the youth, affinity with a brand is not just about quality, but also the causes and behaviors that the brand aligns itself to and the role it plays in them. This sentiment is what is playing out for Dior on social media. The luxury brand reportedly let go of its old ambassador, American model Bella Hadid. Of Palestinian descent, Hadid is a vocal critic of Israel. Over 10,000 innocent people have been killed in the last month in Israel's war on Hamas. But that is not all why the West Asia people are angry. In the last month, frustration has been rising against the Arab leaders too. In Jordan, people condemned their government for not helping the Palestinians. The times are tough, especially for Gazans. But for companies trying to retain consumers on an issue as black and white as the war, it will take special care not to alienate a significant share of their market. What companies need, at least those not willing to choose sides publicly, is a brand strategy that encourages dialogue, not boycott.
That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you always the most recent updates, news and ground reports from the world's most volatile region. I am Ghadi Francis signing off from Beirut. For more global news, keep on watching WION World is One.